Now that I've scared you all with our previous episode about the Black Death, I thought we should lighten the mood a little bit and talk about the Victorian era. Ooh, Queen Victoria, corsets and crinolines, right? Well, not so fast. The Victorian era was also a time of incredible scientific discoveries, major developments in art and literature, and some truly bizarre cultural phenomena. So get ready to learn something new about a time period you thought you already knew everything about. You might be surprised at what you learn. First, let's quickly establish a timeline for those of you who are fuzzy on your British history. The Victorian era was the period of Queen Victoria's reign from June 1837 to January 1901, which was also the longest reign of any British monarch up until Queen Elizabeth II came along. At 63 years and 7 months during this time, Britain experienced massive industrial growth, technological innovation, and an explosion in population. London went from a city of about 1 million people to over 6 million. That's a lot of people to cram into one city. So naturally, living conditions were pretty squalid. There were entire communities of people living in abject poverty in the slums. But there was also a growing middle class with more money to spend on things like art and culture. And if you were part of the very wealthy upper class, life was pretty sweet. Especially if you were a woman, because for the first time, you could legally own property in your own name. Now, that didn't stop most women from continuing to be financially dependent on their fathers or husbands, but it was a start. The arts flourished during the Victorian era, and there were major developments in painting, sculpture, literature, and music. The Royal Academy was founded in 1824, and the first international exhibition was held at the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park in 1851, showcasing the latest inventions and technologies from around the world. Some of the most famous artists of the time were the Pre-Raphaelites, a group of painters who rejected the academic style of painting that was popular at the time and instead focused on more realistic and detailed depictions of everyday life. They got their name from a fictitious brotherhood mentioned in a poem by English painter and poet William Blake. Their leader, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, wanted to create a new style of painting that was based on nature rather than on classical art. Other famous artists of the Victorian era include Ford Madox Brown, John Everett Millais, and William Holman Hunt. But what about the weird stuff? Well, during the Victorian era, there was a growing fascination with all things macabre. This was partly due to the influence of the Romantic movement, which had a strong emphasis on emotion and the supernatural. But it was also a response to the harsh realities of life in Victorian England. People were fascinated by death and the afterlife because they saw so much of it during their everyday lives. Spiritualism became very popular, and many people believed that it was possible to communicate with the dead. Seances were held, and mediums who could supposedly speak to the dead were in high demand. One of the most famous mediums was Daniel Douglas Home, who was said to be able to levitate and move objects with his mind. He was exposed as a fraud, but that didn't stop people from being fascinated by him. Another weird thing about the Victorian era is that people were obsessed with photography. Photography was invented in 1839, and it quickly became a popular way to capture memories and document the world around you. People took photos of everything, including their dead loved ones. Post-mortem photography was a popular genre, and it was not uncommon for families to have their deceased relatives photographed. These photos were often staged, and the dead person would be made to look like they were sleeping or simply on a holiday. Yikes! So there you have it, a quick overview of the Victorian era and some of the weirder aspects of life during Queen Victoria's reign. What did you find most interesting about the Victorian era? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more fun historical tales. Until next time, goodbye.